was like flipped out and just left the house, and I was like, oh my God. And me and Slash looked at each other, we're like, we gotta find the contact lenses, you know? So we went through his pants pockets, we found him in a pair of pants that he'd had on like a couple days prior, and then we couldn't find him. And we're like, oh my God, you know, Eddie Rosenblatt, David Geffen, Tom Zutaut, they're all waiting for us at Geffen, you know? And Slash goes, come here, look at this. And I look outside, and Axl's like sitting on top of the Whiskey A Go-Go, like kind of like in a meditative stance. We were like, oh my God. So we coached him down, went down, signed the contract, and the rest is history.
Having signed to Geffen in August 1986, Guns N' Roses went into the studio to record what would become Appetite for Destruction. However, it proved difficult to find a suitable producer for the album until they met Mike Klink.
They had gone through a couple of producers who just couldn't handle the guys. Guns N' Roses had a very, very definite vision. They knew they wanted what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. They knew how they wanted to sound. And all too often you will find with new bands that seasoned producers will come in and try to imprint their style and their sound and their voice into the recording rather than allowing the artist to do it, especially when they're new, because these seasoned producers think they know better. Well, when you're dealing with a band like Guns N' Roses, they're not going to put up with that. Well, Mike Klink obviously gave them enough leeway that they could work together. But one of the funny stories he had is that one of the first times he met with them and started recording, he said their equipment was so old he doesn't think Slash had ever changed the strings on his guitar. He had to go out and buy new strings and buy some new equipment because their stuff was all beat up, and he didn't know how Slash ever stayed in tune.
When they were in the studio, they would extremely professional. Okay, it wasn't like a big party like everybody probably thinks and everything. Slash, you know, would go in there and lay down his tracks, and you know, it was just them going in and recording.
By December 1986, the band had begun to mix Appetite for Destruction. But with the album not slated for release until July the following year, Geffen were eager to introduce their new band ahead of schedule. It was decided that Guns N' Roses' debut release was to be the EP Live Like a Suicide.
It really was a demo. And the only reason that I believe Geffen Records released it at all is because it took so long for them to do the first album. I mean, they went through several producers before, you know, ending up with Mike Klink. And a record label likes to take advantage of a buzz and heat when it's happening. And when Guns N' Roses were signed, they were very, very hot, at least on the local scene and in the surrounding regions. And so Geffen obviously wanted to take advantage of that and release their demo.
It was a very low-rent type of release. No budget, no stylistics around it. They just punched the music out with a cover that really just represents Gun and a Rose, as it were. And because it was powerful and in your face and very live, the performances really did knock your socks off, and it really captured immediately what this band were about, which was, we don't care, we're not interested in vibe, we're not interested in trend, we're not interested in image or fashion. This is us, this is real, this is in your face, you like it or you don't.
Appetite for Destruction was finally released on the 21st of July 1987. However, it was not an immediate commercial success.
We went out on tour before Appetite actually was released. We went out with the Cult. And so they were touring without an album. And we were up in like Canada, I think, when the album was released. I'm not sure about that. But nobody knew who the band was. And I'm pretty sure that at the time it was going nowhere.
It didn't exactly take off immediately. The first single that they had chosen was Welcome to the Jungle. That didn't do so well. You know, it didn't get much radio play, didn't happen much. And then they did what every label does. They have their ace in the hole. And what you'll notice with a lot of new acts, if the first single doesn't hit, the ace in the hole from the label is generally a ballad, because ballads are historically popular. And so they released Sweet Child of Mine.
What broke the band was Sweet Child of Mine. And I think there are two things about Sweet Child of Mine. Its immediacy as a song because of the melody line, especially Slash's wonderful performance at the beginning. And secondly, it's a love song. And I think that combination crossed them over to a bigger audience. It made them accessible to Bon Jovi fans, for instance, who were a bit put off by Welcome to the Jungle and the fact that this was talking about how dangerous the streets were. They didn't want to know about that. But Sweet Child of Mine struck a chord because it was really a love song, which also had a certain sense of longing and losing. And that wonderful line, "Where do we go now?" which I think a lot of people could identify with. But I think it's that combination which made people realise this is a really special band. They do have an ability to write a song that's an anthem. It's immediate, but it lasts a long time. And on the back of that, Appetite just propelled.
When Appetite for Destruction finally reached #1 in 1988, it propelled Axl to superstardom and has since gone down in history as one of the greatest rock albums of all time.
In 2005, that stands as one of the all-time great albums because of its combination of timeless rock and roll attitude, very cleverly written lyrics, pure heartfelt emotion, wonderful performance, raw but sensible production, and anthems. It's a youth anthem album.
As their success grew, so too did their reputation as the world's most dangerous band. On August the 20th, 1988, an event would take place that would further fuel this image and ignite a tumultuous relationship between Axl and the press.
So they started to get this reputation of being edgy, dangerous, unpredictable, unreliable. When Monsters of Rock at Donington happened in 1988, two things have to be borne in mind. Firstly, it was the biggest event of its type ever. Officially, I think the attendance was 98,000 in August '88. Unofficially, people have put the attendance at something around 130,000. Secondly, it had rained, and it's in a field, and it became very muddy, and there's a slope, an incline, leading down to the stage. Now, Guns N' Roses are really starting to take off big time at that point, and they were very low down on the bill, but such was the vibe about them that everyone pushed towards the front of the stage when they came on. Axl, on more than one occasion, asked the crowd to calm down and move back. Take a step or two back, because you're crushing people at the front. Inevitably, people don't listen, and sadly, 2 people died as a result. The band weren't to blame whatsoever. The conditions underfoot were to blame. But because of Guns N' Roses' reputation, people started to blame them and even claimed they incited a riot, which is absolute nonsense. Now, you can imagine the situation. You've got 5 guys who've come off stage just to be told 2 fans have just died during a performance, through no fault of yours. And then having parts of the press, certainly the more sensationalist part of the press, blowing it up as if it was their fault. How are they going to feel? They're going to feel rather upset and angry and bitter, and I can't blame them. And as a result, they started to see the press as being something to avoid, something to resent. And to be honest, when you're given that sort of treatment unfairly, who can say it's wrong? And Axl certainly started to become a little more tetchy about dealing with people and talking to people, and a little more wary about his vulnerability being put into the public domain. Up until that point, they were quite happy to talk to people, be honest and be open, and suddenly saw, but by doing so, and the reputation they'd got, they were being blamed for something that was totally beyond their control.
The increasing controversy would be further fueled by the band's